Corruption in the Philippines, a continuing challenge from one administration to the other.
Corruption have worsened in the country over the last 2 years.
Millions more impoverished Filipinos.
Nadagdagan ng halos 3 milyon ang bilang ng mga naghihirap na Pilipino.
Unemployment in the Philippines averaged 10.4% this year.
The coronavirus pandemic left 4.5 million Filipinos jobless.
In its simplest definition, corruption is a dishonest behavior and unlawful mean usually done by people in authority or have a high power. The origins of corruption in the Philippines can be traced to the Spanish colonial period, when civil servants were poorly paid, public offices were sold for a profit, and the Governor-General and his officials were appointed by the King of Spain on the basis of patronage and not merit. In 2020, the Philippines ranked 115th out of 180 countries and territories in Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index with a score of 34. Factors such as low salaries lead civil servants to accept bribes. Cultural factors such as utang na loob and the compadre system have made Filipinos more tolerant of corruption. These cultural factors lead to nepotism. An example of this are political dynasties, which makes local communities suffer from inept and corrupt leaders because those who can push for reforms but do not have the inherited political advantage are denied the right to run for public office because of the nature of local politics. The low risk of detection of corrupt offenses and the low probability of punishment for corrupt offenders also contributes for corruption to continue to flourish. Lastly, the lack of political will encourages the offenders to continue doing corrupt practices since the people in power have no desire to implement changes in curbing corruption. Corruption hinders the economic development and increases poverty by diverting domestic and foreign investment away from where they are most needed. It weakens education and health systems, depriving people of their right to live a decent life. It also undermines democracy by distorting electoral processes and undermining government institutions, which can lead to political instability. Lastly, it intensifies inequality and injustice by preventing the rule of law and punishing victims of crime through corrupt rulings.
Poverty occurs for many reasons, but in the Philippines, there are recurring factors that have slowed the development progress. So what are the causes and effects of poverty in the Philippines? First, low to moderate economic growth for the past 40 years. Second, low growth elasticity of poverty reduction. Third, weakness in employment generation and the quality of jobs generated. Fourth, failure to fully develop the agriculture sector. Fifth, high inflation during crisis periods. Sixth, high levels of population growth. Seventh, high and persistent levels of inequality, income, and assets, which dampen the positive impacts of economic expansion. And lastly, recurrent shocks and exposure due to risks such as economic crises, conflicts, natural disasters, and environmental poverty. Economic growth is low compared to neighboring countries. Another cause of poverty in the Philippines is the rise of unmanaged population growth. Because the poor tend to have bigger families, they are unable to access health services or sex education, which leads to more children and the continuation of that cycle. The pattern of growth is common in rural areas, but there has been a rise in poverty in urban areas. Cities in the Philippines have been faced with an increase in poverty due to lack of well-paid employment. Cities in the Philippines have been faced with an increase in poverty due to lack of well-paid employment. One of the causes of poverty in the Philippines is the vulnerability to natural disasters. The Philippines is the most vulnerable country to typhoons, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions in the world. The frequent occurrences cost the country lives, illness, malnutrition, and denial of education and health services. Filipino farmers are some of the most vulnerable because of floods and landslides severely affect their crops and income. Another cause of poverty is the lack of research on poverty and effective policies to implement in order to prevent further damage. This lack of research has caused deficient targeting in poverty programs and unsuccessful current processes. Until more research is done as to how exactly to tackle the poverty trap, programs will not be effective. The difficulties of the Philippines to transition to a higher and sustained level of growth have been explained to be due to a sustained decline in domestic investments, weaknesses in institutions and social infrastructure, institutional uncertainty, and a history and culture that have impeded growth. However, it is also possible that poverty itself is constraining economic expansion. The channels through which poverty may impact on economic growth include: first, investment capacity constraints, or the lack of access to credit aggravated by the underdevelopment of the financial markets. Second, human capital constraints, the lack of education, healthcare, and nutrition. Third, regular doses of risks and shocks causing poverty traps, conflict, and disorder. And lastly, resulting from inequality, which hamper investments and destroy social capital. Poverty directly impacts economic growth due to constraints in credit and the underdevelopment of the financial market and inequality in income and assets. Poverty stretches across the globe, affecting almost half the world's population. Its effects reach deeper. Uniquely connected to different causes, the effects of poverty are revolving. One result leads to another source, leads to another consequence.
Unemployment has remained high in the Philippines at almost twice the level of neighboring countries despite relatively fast employment growth in the past decade. Employment growth was not sufficient to reduce unemployment because of rapid population growth and increased labor force participation. The key policy implications are that higher economic growth and moderation of increases in the real minimum wage are required to reduce unemployment. The causes of unemployment are overpopulation, oversupply of labor force and inability to take on available jobs, social costs, technological advancements, fixed demands in the market hinders applicants to be employed due to lack and or mismatch of skills and additional educational requirements, slow economic growth, and economic recession. Its effects is that it will encounter economic crisis due to slow economic growth. One will face poverty such as homelessness, crime, or self-isolation. Also, it affects family expendable cash, destroys asset value, lowers staff morale, and lessens a global economy output. Lastly is social division. The division between those who are employed and unemployed are rapidly increasing. The country's uneven employment market has traditionally led millions of Filipinos to seek better-paying jobs overseas. 1 out of every 10 Filipinos works abroad, sending billions of dollars in remittances home, helping to drive the country's consumption-driven domestic economy, but doing little to promote employment. Philippines has a high population growth at an average of 1.7% for the past few years, consistently higher than the world's population growth rate at an average of 1.2%. The high population growth rate, which translates to a steady supply for graduates, outstrips the rate at which jobs are created, leaving these graduates finding themselves unemployed. Overpopulation has been one of the main reasons of unemployment here in the Philippines. When a country becomes overpopulated, it gives rise to unemployment as there are fewer jobs to support a large number of people. The rise in employment gives rise to such crimes as people want to feed their families and provide them basic amenities in their life that cannot be met. The social costs of this mass unemployment range from income losses to severe social and psychological problems resulting from not having a job and feeling insecure about the future. Overall, it causes a massive social inefficiency. The reality is that, except in a few cases, governments do intervene in the labor market to achieve some balance between the objectives of fairness, efficiency, and risk allocation. In practice, however, labor market reforms tend to be an effort to reduce government intervention. Labor resources are usually occupationally immobile because it takes time for people to gain the sufficient skills that are necessary for working in a certain industry. Hence, when there is oversupply of labor in a certain industry or when there is a recession, people who become unemployed cannot find work immediately or easily since they cannot be employed in the industry that requires their skills and also cannot work in other industries since they may not have sufficient skills. Hence, the government can provide training programs for the unemployed so that they can improve their skills or gain new skills necessary to ensure their employment. When there is economic growth, employers will be more willing to and able to employ more workers. This helps to address the issue of unemployment. However, this is a long-term strategy that takes a lot of time to see results.
I just got my diploma. I can't wait to apply for a job.
Hello, good morning. This is Ashley Antigua, the President, CEO, and owner of Home Expert Builders. May I see your curriculum vitae? Mm, so you're applying for the position as the HR manager of my company. So please tell me about yourself.
I'm Dine Erica A. Baguio, ABS Psychology from the University of San Carlos, Talamban Campus, Cebu City. I am a people-oriented, hardworking, and a goal-driven person. I also experience HR-related trainings, which makes me more eager to share and apply my knowledge and learnings to your company.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Miss Ashley. I am Adriana Siniza and a BS Psychology graduate. I am flexible in a way that I get to adapt in any situation or in any work that is needed to be done. I am also a people person and I think this would be a great help and advantage, especially that I am applying for the human resource manager position in your company.
Okay, so HR isn't just about administering benefits or settling employee disputes. It's about driving business results through effective people management. So, as an HR manager, how will you drive results?
So, as an HR manager, I believe that the best ways to drive results are to implement policies, reporting, and performance evaluation.
As a human resource manager, I could drive the business by innovating creative ways to handle the company's people, to boost their morale, and to implement team building to improve employees' creativity and connection to one another, which would help accelerate the corporate's goal.
Okay. So, why should we hire you? What's your edge among the other applicants?
Motivated and committed to every responsibility that I take. I have the strategies and techniques to improve the HR department. I am also open minded and I can deal along with others. I have the potential to carry people and I can do counseling. Thank you.
I believe that my experience with handling people, specifically in the field of psychology, makes me the best match for this position. I am also very flexible and adaptive to new learnings. I am sure that I will be able to contribute a lot to the growth of the human resource department and especially to the company.
Okay, thank you so much. It was nice seeing you. And we will just email you for the results next week. Thank you.
An honorable man has a heart for the poor and vulnerable in our society. If corruption is a disease, then transparency is part of its treatment.
No shoes on their feet, the kids begging in the street, and a mother's got a baby with no food to eat. And instead of driving by, pretending not to see. But if the change is gonna come, and it's gotta start with me, and I don't ever wanna sleep again. Long as you ain't got a home, you can use my only bed to rest your weary head. Cause we're in this together, and I don't ever wanna eat again. Long as you're still going hungry, you can take everything you need. It doesn't matter to me, cause we're in this together, my friend. My friend.
Blind man says, could you offer up some change? Oh, yes, sir, I'm thinking about making that change today. 'Cause I've been the one struggling to see you, but I need you as much as you need me. So I'm never gonna sleep again long as you ain't got a home. You can use my only bed to rest your weary head. As we're in this together, and I never wanna eat again. Long as you're still going hungry, you can take everything you need. It doesn't matter to me.